In this movie, I'll show you how to flip selected objects across a guideline. For example, in this case, I've got these two rounded squares here. I'm going to go ahead and partially marquee them with the black arrow tool to select them. And what I want to do is both duplicate and flip them to the other side of the artwork. So I want to flip the shapes with respect to this vertical guideline right there. Now, in a previous chapter, I showed you how to use the transform panel in order to flip objects. And if I click on a word transform and then click on the flyout menu icon, I have this flip horizontal command. And by virtue of the fact that I've selected this right-hand point inside the reference point matrix, I will go ahead and flip the objects around their right-hand edge. That doesn't do me any good. I want to flip them way over here to the other side of the artwork. For that purpose, the transform panel is not going to help you. So rather than transforming from a panel, what you want to do instead is transform using a dedicated tool. So I'm going to press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And just so you have a sense of where this tool is located, I'm going to switch back to the single column toolbox because more likely than not, that's the way you're working. Notice down here, I've got this rotate tool. Well, it has this corner marker, which tells me if I click and hold, I'll get a flyout menu of other tools, including, in this case, the reflect tool, which has a keyboard shortcut of O, which is the most symmetrical letter in the alphabet. That's why Adobe assigned it as a keyboard shortcut. Now, there's all kinds of ways to use this tool. You can click and drag inside the document window. We're not ready for that, however. That's pretty complicated stuff. Instead, we want to work with the dialog box. So two different ways to bring up the Reflect dialog box inside Illustrator. One is to just double-click on a Reflect tool icon in the toolbox. That brings up the Reflect dialog box. And notice, because the preview checkbox is on, we're seeing a reflected version of the object inside the illustration. Again, this isn't doing us any good, however, because by default, you're reflecting across the center of the selected objects, and that's not what we want at all. So I'm going to cancel out of this dialog box. Now, a little bit of an aside here. Many of you probably already know this, but you can tell whether a command name is going to bring up a dialog box based on whether the name is followed by an ellipsis. By which I mean, if I go up here to the Select menu and I choose the All command, then I'm just going to select all of the artwork inside the illustration, no questions asked. However, if I choose Save Selection, which is followed by an ellipsis, that is a ... That's Illustrator and every other computer application out there's way of saying we're striking up a conversation using a dialog box. Same thing happens with the old cursor here. Notice I've got this cross-shaped cursor associated with the Reflect tool. But if I press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, I get a little ... next to the cursor, which means we're going to have a conversation via a dialog box. So in other words, ... means dialog box, no ... means no dialog box. So press and hold the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and then click on this vertical guideline. Anywhere along the vertical guideline is fine. And that brings up the Reflect dialog box. And you can see that by default, I've gone ahead and flipped these shapes to the other side of the artwork. Now that assumes, incidentally, that axis is set to vertical. Now this is a real head scratcher for most people because we're actually flipping the object horizontally. Why does it say vertical? If I was to select horizontal instead, then you'll see that the shape, which is now located down here in the bottom of the illustration, you can barely see it anymore. We're now flipping it vertically to a new location. We're flipping vertically with respect to that little target right there, which indicates the point at which I Alt or Option clicked. The idea is this is the axis, so we're flipping across an axis. Do you want to flip across a horizontal axis? Well, no, you don't, because we're trying to flip across a vertical guideline. You want to go ahead and flip across that vertical guideline by selecting vertical, which means you're going to perform a horizontal flip across a vertical axis. Really, you just want to make sure you have the preview checkbox turned on. Very important, of course. Then you can play around with these items and see which one works for you. But definitely before you leave, and once you figure out everything's all right, go ahead and click not on OK, because that'll just flip the actual shapes themselves. You want to click on Copy in order to flip a copy of those shapes like so. Slight problem, however. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here so you can see what I'm talking about. Notice that both shapes appear at the front of the layer, and that's not what we want. We want that rear rounded square to appear in back of the ellipses. go ahead and grab your black arrow tool once again. Click off the shapes to deselect them. Click on that rounded square in order to select it. Right-click inside the square to bring up the shortcut menu. Choose Arrange, and then choose Send to Back. And you'll put the rounded rectangle at the back of the layer, which is exactly where it belongs. And that's how you both copy and reflect objects across an axis inside of Illustrator. In the next exercise, we'll begin work on the arrow.